I'm going to cover a lot. I'm going to cover a lot of stuff, so I'm going to be moving pretty fast. Right? I would advise you to stay through the whole thing. The difference is going to be is that I don't mind if you guys ask questions while I'm going along, right? Because there's a bunch of stuff here, so when we get to the end, and I will say, hey, do you have questions? You might go like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff I don't even know what to ask, right? So if there's something in between that ends up being a, that you're like, I'm not sure how this would like convert to what I'm doing or my sport or whatever it is, just ask the question, right? Because the point of this seminar is for you to take as much away as possible and not for, me to just be like, oh, here's all this smart stuff that I know, right? Everything is to be kind of like carried over, okay? So actually raise your hands first if you're an athlete here. All right, quite a good amount. Are you an athlete in this state? Okay. Anybody here a coach? Cool. It's a sad thing, like one coach. Unbelievable, right? It's like, I'll take 20 hours to put a seminar together for free. And no coaches show up. Huh? Okay. All right. So what we're covering, speed kills, right? How to create a team with a killer game speed. Honestly, this is for individuals too, obviously. But this is stuff that I've done with, 75 football players on a team doing speed training, basketball athletes, soccer, rugby, all types of stuff. The thing is so this is, a lot of it is theory, right? And so it's the theory behind stuff. And then what we'll do is, we're not doing demonstrations today, but I will do some stuff with Theo, even if we'll turn around, even though Gene is filming and stuff, and maybe Daniel and Theo will do a couple of drills, or even better, if you guys want to stick around for like maybe 15 to 20 minutes when we have Q&A, like the stuff that I'm showing, at least in the speed and agility drills, if you want to stick around and see how it's done on the turf, I'm more than happy to do that. Obviously, there's a huge context beyond this because I'm talking about strength training and mobility and stability and a lot of other stuff that pieces together what is a really, really good athlete that can accelerate, decelerate, stop, jump, all that stuff really well, right? So it's not just one thing, okay? If that makes sense. All right, so number one thing, right? I call it the scientific prerequisite, which is not that scientific, but it's true, right? What is the number one thing you need to improve in any type of performance? It's to believe, right? It's to be a belief. And this is honestly something not only for athletes, but a big thing for coaches that I tell people. Like if you guys know Martin Rooney used to be, now he's the founder of Training for Warriors, but a lot of people don't know Martin Rooney for 15 years, 20 years was the director of the Parisi Speed School who still has the most fastest athletes at the NFL Combine. Like 10, 11 years in a row running, they basically had a fastest athlete at the NFL Combine. So, he knows a little bit about speed, you could say, right? So, and these were not like number 1, number 5, number 20 draft picks. This was actually a lot of guys that were not even on the radar. And they were crushing the Combine, right? So it's not like, oh, he got this incredible athlete. Everybody knew they were going to be fast, and that's who they went to the Combine with. No, he was putting out athletes that weren't actually on the radar at all. And, he always said, hey, Luka, you know what? All of these drills and all the science behind it is so important, but he's like, if you don't have this, like, you'll never make athletes great, right? If you believe in the athlete that they are going to be fast, like, that's the number one thing that's going to make them train hard. Because if they're like, well, I have no chance, right? I can't compete with these guys. I can't do this. Psychologically now, you're not applying all the effort that you can into all the drills. You're not coming into the strength sessions and busting your butt believing that you can be way better. You're not coming to the extra workouts. You're not doing your recovery like you should, right? You're going out and partying, doing this and that and the other, right? So you have to believe. And for a coach, like personally for me, that's my number one thing. Like anybody that comes in here, I believe. I believe that they can be incredible, right? Like I don't even go like, can you be as good? I just know that they can be 100 times better than when they walked in here. And that's the number one step, right? And this is kind of like the only thing I'm going to cover today as far as, the psychology of training goes. But, it's so important. So for everybody that's here, just know that you have the potential to be, I don't know what your potential is, but I know that it's big. And I know that you haven't reached it yet, no matter where you are. All right, so remember that, and for that, you need to believe. All right, number one prereq. If you go home and you got something out of that, like you're already ahead, right? Now, how do we develop speed? Right? Really, the theory of this is very, very simple, right? When we break it down, there's really only two ways to develop pure speed, right? We're talking about pure speed now, okay? So increase the amplitude, length of your stride, and to increase the frequency of your stride, or in your stride. Does everybody get what that means? Right? So either your stride is longer, right? Or you take faster strides. Right? That's the only two ways that you can improve speed. Like when we break it down, we completely break it down. How about game speed? And this is, we're going to come back to this, but I think that a lot of, we get guys coming in here, I want to improve my 40-yard dash, right? I want to improve my 50-yard and 100-meter sprint. And, okay, so what sport do you play? Lacrosse, soccer, basketball? Here's the thing, is like you're never reaching 100 meters speed here. That guy is never reaching 100 meters speed. The basketball court is actually 25 meters long, or 27, right? And he has a basketball in his hand. Do you run the same with a basketball in your hand, or like this? Right? Like this is pure speed, right? Even in football. I'm carrying an egg. All right, football, right? So, and you got to dodge people, you got to hit them, right? If I put a lacrosse player, the lacrosse player sprints with a lacrosse basically bat in his hand the whole time, catching balls and doing all types of stuff, right? So, we'll get back to this, but just remember, right? How many of you here are track and field athletes? Right, 2, 3. Do you play any other sports? Yeah, right? Basketball? Basketball and football? What would you preferably do when you grow up, when you get older? All right. I'm not knocking on track and field because I think it's great. Not at all. I'm saying that for a lot of people, what is game speed, right? The mentality or even the coaches are like, we're doing all these 100-meter sprints, we're doing all these different things. Yeah, but like, if I want to be fast on the court, this is a lot different than this, okay? All right, so we want to make sure that we get that down. Like, it's a big difference training top speed and game speed, okay? So, team sport speed and straight linear speed athletes have very different demands, and thus a part of training for it has quite a different emphasis, a part of it. Some of it is similar and the same, right? But we're going to talk about that a little bit later, okay? So, which one counts, right? Which one counts when it comes to speed? Which one counts more, stride length, stride frequency? So here's the deal, right? Does anybody remember in grade school the kid who had the fastest stride? Like when you watch him run, right? The kid that wins the races has the quickest stride. You see a little kid and his legs are spinning like the road runner, right? It's just like, right? And that would, like Pee Wee football or team and track. Like their legs look like they're spinning 90 miles an hour. Does anybody remember stuff like that, right? I know for a fact, like right now, if we pulled up, younger than 10, younger than 8-year-olds, and we clicked on YouTube and said, fastest kid on this team or like fastest kids, and you'd watch them run, and every single one, you'd see their legs just go like this, right? Super, super, super fast, right? Stride frequency. Now, here's the thing about stride frequency, right? Right, this is the training truth. If anybody knows Anatoly Bondarchuk, a lot of like I would say, Russian scientists and strength coaches, right, which were the smartest, state that athletes from the age of 12 to 14 and a 6 to 7 age range also respond best to speed training. So their systems are plastic. If you guys know about nervous system stuff, it's called neuroplasticity, right? It means that when our nervous system adapts to the demands we put on it the most, right? So there's a 6 to 7 age range that has that, but 12 to 14 responds best to speed training, right? So this is when the muscle fibers can be influenced the most during those ages. Other hands, so think about it. If you're at 12 to 14 years old and you got somebody running miles and doing a lot of slow, steady state cardio, that's how that nervous system is going to adapt to that plasticity, right? So if you want to be an athlete, football athlete, track and field athlete, sports that require a lot of explosiveness, agility, wrestlers, things like that, 12 to 14 is that age range where you should be training, I would say, properties that are going to make you fast and explosive, right? Because after, and I'm going to get to this, right? So remember, movements that enhance slow twitch fibers at that age will hinder the ability to develop fast twitch characteristics. So simply said, the way you train is the way that your muscles and your nervous system at that age range is going to confirm, right? So if you're doing track and field and it's like, okay, guys, we're doing 5-mile run, it's very counterproductive. I mean, there's more to it, but those are very counterproductive things, okay? Now, here's the thing. At this point, stride frequency, right? It's the most trainable before athletes reach puberty. This is the most important thing because you have coaches that try to train stride frequency and put a lot of time into it after puberty. And it's literally not, you're not doing much, right? Because at that time, remember, CNS is still developing and can be molded. It's like clay. So this is also the best time to introduce kids to multiple sport activities, right? So it's non-specialized multi-sport exposure. Gymnastics, martial arts, dance, soccer, playing with friends, things like that, right? Because you want as much like of movement patterns to develop, like animal movements, bear crawls, and all that cool stuff, right? It's actually very, very counterproductive for kids to do one sport. So basically, if you're just doing, right, from the age of 6, all there is baseball. You don't develop multiple movement patterns. It actually is very, especially once the kid gets older, it's high exposure to injuries, and they actually will start slowing down in progress compared to the other kids that did do these things, right? So, but the main thing is that stride frequency pretty much, right, can only be trained before puberty, right? So after puberty, there's not much you can do about it. It's not like, I mean, can you improve it a little bit? Yeah, but 97% of it is going to be stride length, right? So remember that. If you're doing training for stride frequency and you're after puberty, you're kind of like wasting your time, right? You'd be spending your energy and time on a lot better stuff, right? So the thing is, every performance coach dreams of working with Olympic and pro athletes, but it's the coaches that work with young kids that might have the biggest impact because that's basically, you're helping to mold their CNS in those time frames, right? Those guys that are on Olympic athlete level, first of all, how many of them are there, right? You can count them on your fingers, right? But there's thousands of kids that need help, right? So you might be one of the most powerful and influential things a coach can contribute. I will say this, apart from instilling great core ethics and core values, which I think is number one, but right, in that age range, if you can make the kid an athlete as far when it comes to performance, you can mold them more than anyone else, right? So that's very, very powerful, and that's a big training truth, especially if you're a coach or you are going to end up being a coach. Just remember that. Like, you have a huge effect on their performance and their mindset at those ages, okay? All right, stride length. So at this high school, college, Olympic, and professional level, fastest athletes are the ones that take the fewest steps, right? Which means the greatest stride length. So if I run 100 meters, and we'll get to some stats, right? If I run 100 meters and I run it in less steps than you, that means I took less strides because my stride length was longer, right? So the majority of the improvements, so 90% in the 10-yard sprint times, are due to taking fewer steps. So remember, most team sports, so especially like short things that are football, basketball, lacrosse, volleyball, stuff like that, right? Most of it is acceleration, deceleration, and then reacceleration, right? In really short spaces. And if you think about it, that the 90% of the improvement in the 10-yard sprint times are due to taking fewer steps, that means that is where the most of your progress will lie, right? That's where you can make the most progress, right? Stride length. All right, so I'll give you some examples. This is actually from an awesome manual and product. Is DeFranco's training system speed manual, which has just great information. But you can see the improvements, like Miles Austin, who they train, an NFL wide receiver, right? He took 7.5 steps coming in, and his 10-yard split was 1.77. His 40-yard was 4.62, right? Then he improved this time to 1.62 10-yard and 4.47 40-yard, 6 steps. So he cut 1.5 steps down on his basically 40-yard dash, right? So if you think about that, that's pretty significant, okay? Chris Hogan, D-Wedge college player, now he's NFL wide receiver. Same thing. You can look. Every time there's an improvement, less steps, right? Usain Bolt won his gold medal at the 2012 Olympics, taking 41 steps. Everyone else took 44 to 46, right? So he took 3 to 5 steps less in 100 meters. And basically, that was the difference that he crushed everybody by, right? Same thing. USA's, this is a very interesting one because, like, USA's 60-meter hurdler, Aries Merritt, changed his approach to the first hurdle, right? So he was, he never won a gold medal, But all he did was focus on that first hurdle. And he took it down. So instead of taking 7 steps, he took 6. And he got an Olympic gold medal that year. Right? How big of a difference? Just 1 step, okay? So that kind of just shows you. And the thing is, if we kept going on, like I could show you examples in absolutely everything, that like less steps creates. In 95, 97% of the time, you're going to see that less steps basically means faster, right? So really kind of like there's 2 ways to improve stride length, right? Trying to keep it like really, really, really simple, right? And the 2 different ways are increase relative strength is number 1. So the stronger that you are in relationship to your body, right? That's what relative strength is, right? It makes you propel your body further in space with each foot strike. So imagine if I can deadlift, and I'm just using deadlift or squat as an example, right? If I can deadlift 200 pounds, right? That means I can apply 200 pounds of force into the ground. So when I'm sprinting, there's a certain amount of force that I can apply into the ground, right? And then I come to the gym, I have a good training program. In 5 or 6 months, I go from 200 pounds to 350 pounds or 400 pounds, right? So now I can apply twice the amount of force into the ground. So when I sprint, now I'm applying twice the amount of force. Guess what's going to happen? I'm going to propel further in space. So my stride length is going to improve, right? So I'm saying this because one of the mistakes that you see a lot of times is I want to get faster, I want to get faster. People start doing a lot of sprinting, right? And they start doing sprints and plows and all these different things. But they don't have the relative strength. So it actually won't help you that much. You'll start seeing a little bit of a gain, and then you'll start seeing injuries and inflammation and all types of stuff because you don't have the joint integrity, the muscle strength, and all these different things to actually be able to do that. It's very, very simple. If you're a car, relative strength means horsepower goes up, right? The weight of the car doesn't go up, but the horsepower goes up. And that's essentially, right? A lot of your improvements in jumping ability and in speed happen in the weight room, right? They happen in the weight room. Number 2, increase flexibility, mobility, and stability, all right? I'll explain exactly what that means, right? And more specifically, the flexibility in the hips and legs are the major factors that determine the athlete's ability, right, to fully extend the hip, knee, ankle when accelerating. So imagine if, like, I'm really, really tight. All right, how many? Like, raise your hands if you feel like you have tight hip flexors, like you have, right? Most people, especially if you're sitting a lot every day, you don't do the right stretches and mobility and things like that. Now, if right now I just took random people out of their seats and went, okay, let's do a hip flexor stretch. For instance, the rectus femoris stretch right here. How tight would you be? Because think about it. If I can't fully extend my knee and my hip, and you'll see a lot of people, they finish here, right? How can I apply the most force? It's impossible. It's like I'm losing the strength that I have, I'm losing it because I can't fully apply that force, right? I have to stop here because I'm so tight. My butt's out here, it's not working like it should, my low back is tight, right? So I may be strong, right? But if I can't get into the positions I need to, right, to apply this force, I'm literally losing power, right? So maybe I have 100% of strength, but here I'm only applying 75, 80, whatever it may be, just losing it. It's just gone. That's why this is so important, right? So having functional mobility enables the athlete to move unrestricted and finish each stride. The other place you can see it, when we do prowler pushes, you'll see a lot of people, they just keep these like little short steps, never following through, like they don't stay low, right? If they're low, their butt's out. They have all types of weird postures. And that just is called like energy leaks, right? That means that I just cannot get the energy from the ground through my body, and I'm losing energy. Simple, right? So we also need stability at certain joints. So here's one quick, that's why I said stability also. So I'll give you the perfect example, which at the end of the presentation, I'll talk about core strength. Now, everybody's heard about core, and everybody thinks core is just abs, but it's a lot of different muscles, including the hips, right? So if I'm going to tuck my shirt in a little bit. Everybody knows, the butt out posture. So this is anterior pelvic tilt, right? You've seen this a lot, right? So if I'm in this position, if you stand up right now and put your butt out like this, what happens to your low back? But what do you feel? Tight. Feel tight, right? It's pressure. Now the thing is, if I'm in this position and I try to do this, and you touch my butt, it's soft, right? Literally, like, but my low back is really, really tight. So I'm here, I can't really fire my butt like I should. My abs are stretched out, right? They're not firing, they're just stretched. So in this position, if I'm running like this, and if I make you run like this, you're not really going to be fast. It's impossible to be fast, right? Because I don't have the core strength, right, to resist this movement, right? But if my core is nice and tight and aligned, right, now I can produce force. Okay, so this means I have stability in this area, right? The other thing that needs stability, right, is, for instance, certain areas need mobility, upper back. If you're really stiff in your upper back, which a lot of people are from computers and stuff like that, how do I get maximum arm swing, right? And the thing is, when I'm stiff up here, guess what happens? This becomes loose, and it's not a good thing, because that's how you get your back hurt. So basically, those are the two. Like, if you break it down to the simplest form, is I need to be able to get into the positions that make me fast, and I need to have strength and stability in positions that are going to allow me to do that, right? So same thing with the hips. If you have, like, unstable hips, like, your hips should be mobile, right? Because what if I can't come down here? How am I going to squat? How am I going to jump, right? How am I going to, I'll give you the perfect example. I used to play professional basketball, right? What do you do in basketball, right? You're in a stance a lot, and you have to do slides to catch people. Now, if I have tight hips, what do you see ball players do a lot when they have tight hips? They go to right about here, then they can't go back anymore, and then they're here. So now I'm moving from the low back, right? Because they can't really get low with the hips. So they're moving from their low back. They hurt their low back, they're slow, because if I have to change direction, right, and I'm low, I can change direction fast if my hips are mobile. If I don't, I'm like here, and I got to swing, I got to do 2 extra steps. So I might be fast, but I can't react fast, okay? So that's why this may seem like not a big deal, but it's the biggest deal, right? And I can prove it over and over again. Take somebody that's tight, that doesn't have hip mobility, and we'll have them do certain drills and do like rabbit drills and mirror drills. And straight speed, you might win, but when we start changing direction, you're not going to. Then you start losing a step here and there, and you can't react fast, right? Because you're not in the right positions. So training truth number 3. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you are when it comes to teaching technique, right? Because if the athlete is too weak and immobile to get in the positions you want them to, they'll never achieve their full speed potential. See this all the time. We're doing all these like A skip drills, B skip drills, foot fire techniques, and all types of stuff. And the kids are just weak. They're weak and immobile. You can do those drills all day long, and I'll have a set of athletes that don't do any technique drills, but they're strong and mobile, and they'll just crush. They'll just crush the other team like into oblivion, right? So lack of movement capability and foundational strength, you won't be able to get faster. If you don't get into the positions, you can't produce the force, period, right? So note, take into account when designing dynamic warm-ups, right? So think position mobility versus at a specific joint. What I mean by that is, like, I'm not talking about stretching your hamstrings, right? Because people go like, oh, I have tight hamstrings, I need to stretch my hamstrings. No, I'm talking about mobility drills, right? So, and like I said, this could be a whole separate presentation, but imagine, like, for instance, like a Cossack squat, right? Here, I'm moving through the range of motion. Make sense? So I'm actually moving. Think of it like moving and stretching at the same time. We'll get to it. Versus just sitting there and stretching a muscle, right? So we want to be positional mobility, right? It's different. Like I said, guys and girls, if you have any questions, please ask me, right? So formula for rapid acceleration. Improve relative strength, improve mobility and stability at appropriate positions, and you have a great foundation for rapid acceleration and speed. All right, it's actually a very simple formula when you break it down like that. Okay? Like I said, if you're thinking, okay, how does this relate to my sport, just ask. All right? So, technical considerations, acceleration, right? And I put a picture up because this will, like, obviously give you a great example, right? So steep forward lean and positive shin angle, right? Positive shin angle means that his shin is over his toe. So if we're literally doing acceleration drills, right, you don't want, this is not a positive shin angle. This is, right? Because now, guess what? I'm going to go in the direction of my shin angle. So where do I want the force to go when I accelerate? This way, not up, okay? So that's very, very important. And go back to this. Think about what happens when you have tight ankles. Right? If I have a really tight ankle and my knee can't go forward, now I'm stuck here. Now I got to do all these weird things to get in position. Right? So it just shows that how like everything, if you have a restriction somewhere, it can slow everything down. Okay? So knee stays in front of the toe. Foot should land under or slightly behind the hip. Right? Because when we accelerate, we're leaning. Right? The people that come up very fast don't accelerate well. Okay? So when we accelerate, the first 20 to 30 yards, if you're doing a 100-yard sprint, you're low. Okay? So here's a great cue if you're doing acceleration drills and sprinting. Okay? Apply force back into the ground and drive arms forward. Right? So one of the mistakes that you see in acceleration is that people want to get somewhere fast. So they're spinning their legs like this. Right? But in acceleration, really what you want to do is you want to punch the ground away. Right? So arms swing forward and you punch the ground away backwards. Right? And you actually want to have as much contact time with the ground as possible. Because tell me one thing you can't do when you're in the air. You can't push force into the ground, right? Exactly. So the mentality a lot of times is you see like, I want to punch and just keep going and have my feet in the air. No. Like you want to keep as much contact with the ground because now I can actually apply force. And then quick turnover and then do it again in acceleration, right? So think about that, which is like the reason we use heavy sled work, because it gives you that feeling. If I have a heavy sled, right, and we put hella weight on it, you can't turn over fast. You have to push through and follow through and then push through and follow through again, right? So it ingrains that motion. And trust me, like within weeks, we'll get people running faster 10-yarders because we just get that down. Improve mobility, get core strength firing right, and then pushing that ground away, right? So remember, falling forward, like a lot of the drills at the beginning. So if you guys ever heard hurdle, step over, drill, and then punch, step here, step over the hurdle, and basically punch, right? So you wait till you fall, because when you're falling, guess what? When you're landing on your face, or you're going to have to punch away. All right, so it's a lot of drills that like teach that technique, because otherwise people get up really fast, and they're making force go this way instead of that way, right? So don't rush. This is what I was talking about earlier. Don't rush the acceleration phase with a lot of quick steps, right? Call it going nowhere fast. I used to do that a long time ago, right? I thought I was really fast. My feet were all over the place, but I wasn't going anywhere. And a lot of people do that. Man, my feet are so fast, but I'm not going anywhere. And the other person beats you with 2 steps, right? Take big, powerful strides. Ground contact should be longer, right? Longer the ground contact, the better, which is, for a lot of people, counterintuitive, but that actually makes you faster, right? So it's important to finish each stride and extend the hip, knee, foot, ankle fully before taking the next step. And this is what I was talking about, right? If I caught you, okay, in this position, look at that. Extended hip, knees about to extend, ankle, right? He's getting the most amount of force out of that. Now, what if his ankle was not here, but it was here, right? His knee was here, right? And his hip was here. So even though he might be strong, he's losing percentages of force, like of power output on every single joint area, right? But you see he's got a nice, if you go from the shoulder, I mean, he's about to lock out here. It's a straight line, right? And that's Usain Bolt, so, he's kind of fast, kind of, right? So what are the most important things when you accelerate? Relative, starting, and explosive strength, right, are needed during this phase. So think about that. Like relative strength we just talked about. That's how strong you are compared to your body weight, right? And a lot of, with deadlifts and squats, it's a pretty easy number, right? If I weigh 200 pounds and I deadlift 500, right, I can basically deadlift 2.5 times my body weight. It's pretty simple to calculate, right? You just divide it. Starting and explosive strength are how fast, like a 0 to 60, right? 0 to 60. How fast can you fire those muscle fibers from 0, right? So a deadlift is a great example, right? Because think about it. You're on the ground, You don't have any, you're not doing an elastic setup. You set up, right? It's 0 to 60, okay? So that's starting strength. Clean, right? So some Olympic lifts, box squats where you sit down and you literally pause for 2 to 3 seconds so you have no elastic energy and then bump back up. There's a lot of examples of this. But when we improve relative and starting explosive strength, if I do no, and I'll show you this awesome example from the University of Minnesota when they did these tests, right? If you do no sprint work, none whatsoever, and we test you today, right? We test you today and we do a 20-yard shuttle, a 10-yard acceleration. And I put you on an 8-week training program, and I get your relative starting strength, explosive strengths up, and I improve your mobility, and we do the drill again, you'll crush it. Like not once will you do a sprint and you'll crush it. I guarantee you, every single one, I don't care who it is. Guaranteed. Right? All right. Difference, right? This is now max velocity sprinting, right? See how big of a difference it is, the position, okay? Body's in an upright posture, reduced ground contact time. Big difference, right? In acceleration, we wanted you to keep basically the ground contact time as long as possible so I can apply the most force into the ground. Here, not so much, because now it's more elastic. Right here, reduced ground contact time. So and here the foot strike should be directly underneath the center of gravity. So when I sprint, it should be right there. Now, how many times has anybody here sprinted 100 meters and done one of two things? Strain a hamstring or strain a hip flexor? Yeah, the rest of you are lying. Okay. Yes. Right, so you know why that happens? I mean, there's a lot of reasons, obviously, you know, not having enough core strength, being tight, and so on and so forth. But if basically I land in front, right, if I'm sprinting, and if I land here, the pressure on my hamstrings is insane, right? I'm literally kind of doing like a straight-legged bounce. And I'm not extending the hip, my butt's not working, nothing's working, so the hamstring gets crazy amounts of pressure, and that's how you usually strain it. Hip flexors get strained because I hit behind myself. Right? So I'm going extremely fast, and instead of going under myself, I go behind myself. You got tight hip flexors, boom, when you get a pull. All right, so it's important to get the most out of it. I want the foot strike, boom, to be right underneath my body, right? So in acceleration phase, we have a drive or a push, right? I'm driving, I'm pushing. Here is a cycle, right? I'm cycling, boom, boom. And you guys have done drills if you've ever done track and field stuff, right, where you do cycle stuff, right? Because your legs are cycling. It touches the ground and you float because it's more elastic, right? So we're running at top speed, arms backward behind the hip, right? So you pull, is a pull back cue, because if I pull back, guess what happens? Compared to acceleration, it's elastic. So it's a natural reflex in the pec shoulders, fire the arms forward. So if I push back, it naturally pumps them forward, right? Pulling back of upper body helps with full extension on the opposite leg. So when I pull back, boom, the opposite leg extends, right? Because they're connected. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so only way to reach top speed max velocity is when reactive elastic is optimal, which means we have to be in a relaxed state. You guys ever watch the Olympics when people sprint and they do the slow-mo and everybody's face is just like doing all that, right? It's because they're completely relaxed, right? And you'll see next time you're anywhere on the track on your team and watch what people do. They're trying to muscle sprints, right? Especially at top speed. So acceleration phase, yeah, there's more inertia and we have more tension. But once we get to top speeds, you should be relaxed. You're floating, boom, boom. And that's why you see the top athletes in the world, if you slow it down, their cheeks are going left and right because they're relaxed, right? Because the only way to have maximum elasticity and reactivity is to be relaxed. So when we do, like for instance, at the beginning of training sessions, sometimes we do elasticity drills. For instance, we do, if you're doing hops, right? Like, if you see somebody doing this, I'm going to take a dump, right? It's not good because we're training the elasticity of the tendons and not the muscles so much, if that makes sense. Right? So we got to know what we're training and what's different. But the truth is, for most of you, if you're doing team sports, you'll never reach this in the game. Right? I'm not saying that we never train it, but you don't really need it that much. Right? You don't really need it that much. All right, overcoaching. So proper running mechanics are important. I'm not trying to make fun of, teaching mechanics. I'm really not, because we do. And you should be, if you're a coach, you should be well-versed in, teaching them. And if you're an athlete, you should pay attention to them, right? But overcoaching can be an issue, especially with people that are non-track athletes, that don't do track and field, right? And you see that a lot, where coaches start teaching perfect technique, right? And it's like they're never going to use that in the sport that they're practicing or playing, right? So be conservative and just know the difference between bad form and somebody's individual differences, right? Because there's a big difference, because people have mannerisms, and every athlete has it's called anthropometry, right? So it's basically different limb lengths. So you see people with really long legs, short arms, long torsos, and so for every person like that, they have different muscle insertion points, mobility, fiber type ratios, body fat, and so people are going to run different, really different. You guys know how Ben Johnson ran, right? It was definitely not the proper technique and what everybody taught, but hey, what are you going to say? The dude was fast, right? So it doesn't really matter, and you can look at a lot of different people. They're going to run a lot of different ways. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? So be very careful as far as somebody's overcorrecting your technique, and you could be spending time getting stronger and building relative strength and starting strength and crushing stuff versus your technique is off of whack, but really the whole game you're holding a lacrosse bat, right? So note that all perfect form goes out the window for non-track athletes during competition. Why? This is what we talked about earlier, right? Bam, right? That guy doesn't even ever swing both of his arms at the same time, right? He's just moving, right? So think about it. Basketball player racing full speed, stopping and cutting, he's got to dribble a basketball. It's a whole different world, right? Football running backs to run with a ball in his hand while cutting, stiff arming, dragging people, right? Defenders as they tackle him. That doesn't look anything like this, right? Soccer player run at the same time, kicking the ball, constantly changing direction, right? Big, big, big difference. Okay, wrestlers, which is obviously very, very short space, right? Need speed and power to execute explosive takedowns, but the textbook sprint for them is not in the play at all, right? Now, I'm not saying that sprints don't help them, but it's a whole different world. Lacrosse players hold a lacrosse stick throughout a competition. Spring mechanics go out the window, right? So this is why it's important to know that a lot of times this overcoaching, right? So get your athletes faster, more explosive. If their technique is a little off, right? They're still fast, and the technique doesn't raise concern with injury, right? So orthopedic standpoint, you're not looking at it and saying, ooh, right? I'm my knee's collapsing in like valgus. You don't have to overcorrect that stuff. You really don't, right? Especially, like I said, team sports. So perfect sprint mechanics and restricted linear movements rarely exist in team sports. You just won't see them. You won't see anybody break away and just have, the Usain Bolt sprint. So don't waste time nitpicking minor details for track athletes, right? Think about it. If you're an athlete, you have so much technical stuff to worry about with the skill of the sport that you're practicing, whatever it may be. Like I said, if you're a basketball player, for me, man, ball handling drills all day, right? Once I'm playing point guard, I got to know all the drills. So overthinking is not good, right? So think about this as a coach, or even if you're an athlete, right? When making a correction, only give one cue at a time and let the athlete fix it. All right, so this is huge. Have you ever had somebody look at you and go all right, your arm swing is off. You got to fully extend in the back of hip. Also, keep your neck neutral and be relaxed. And you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? So fix one thing at a time and you got 85% success rate. You try to fix 2, 37. 3 and you're fucked, right? It's actually Buddy Morris said that. But it's true. If I give you too much stuff, and you'll see why, because the brain doesn't like too much, right? If you have to think a lot, sprint is a high, and we're going to get to this part, right? Sprint is a high brain activity. The more you think about it, slower you go, right? So if I'm thinking about everything I got to do, you can't actually be as fast as you possibly can, right? That's Charlie Francis, by the way, which, if you ever read Speed Trap, Charlie Francis is probably one of the greatest speed coaches ever, Ben Johnson's coach. If you haven't read that, you got to read it. But stuff he says is usually pretty on point. All right, so that was pretty much, the north-south speed as far as the theory behind it and what we would need to do, right? But most people, I would say, that are here and are interested in team sports, you're thinking about agility, right? What is agility? It's the whole body change of direction. So usually synonymous terms that people use is cutting, quickness, right? So most research on agility testing has applied the term agility to describe any dynamic sport in action that involves a change in the body position, right? So, I mean, you see that guy, essentially you're like, oh yeah, that's agility training, right? Change of direction. So here's the truth about agility, and this is where a lot of people, a lot of coaching goes wrong. I wouldn't say wrong, but get stuck, right? From experience, and there's a lot of science that backs this up, and we'll go through it, that getting better at predetermined patterns using specific cone drill does not transfer on-field agility needed for any sport, right? So because actually playing athletes must react to unpredicted environments, right? And real game time situations. Does that make sense? Right? So if I put 2 cones right here, okay, and I go, all right, you're going to go down and back to that cone twice, right? And we're going to improve that. So as we train, you're going to start getting down and back to that cone faster, okay? That doesn't necessarily convert to like real sports very well. Because in sports, you're going to have to sprint, and then something's going to happen, and you're going to have to react to it. Visual, verbal, so on and so forth. All right, does that make sense? Because if anybody doesn't, is like, okay, what are you talking about? Please ask. But as we move forward, I'm going to show you some really, really interesting and cool stuff, right? So what's missing? Inclusion of perceptual and decision-making components. So reaction, right? And we'll talk about what types of reaction that is. I mean, obviously, it says, perceptual and decision-making, but we're going to talk more specific. So ability to compare change of direction to reaction and decision-making abilities, and then testing and training that transfers to sport. So, what are the tests that you, if you're doing football stuff or basketball stuff, what are the tests that you are actually testing in training, right? 5-10-5 drills, L drills. I mean, you guys know combine stuff, right? But those things, they actually don't transfer very well onto the football field. And if you looked at the stats of who was the fastest 40-yard dashers, they're actually not doing very well in the NFL. You can go back and look at the statistics, right? Because it doesn't mean that you run the fastest 40-yard dash, that you react to situations in the game. All right, so Vern Gambetta, very, very smart, known strength pros, right? Perhaps the biggest shortcoming in most agility work is the lack of reaction component. So research out of Australia has shown significantly different patterns of activation on a simple cutting task done with reaction than the same ones done without reaction. In short, reaction basically changes everything, right? Has to be incorporated early and often if it's placed as part of a logical progression. When we get to the end, you guys will see how you can progress different drills and stuff. And like I said, at the end, if you want to stick around, we'll do a couple of drills, and it will be really interesting for you guys to see, right? So it should be practiced to the dominant cue demanded by the game. So remember, some sports are more visual, some are more verbal, right? Some are kinesthetic. So remember, you practice the way that you play in a sport as far as the cues, right? I just thought that was cool if you didn't get it. All right, James Bond, agility, react with agility. All right. So the ability to change direction and react is fundamental to all sport, and therefore we must basically able to test both capabilities. So change of direction, that's basically, right, program. So a pre-programmed rapid whole body movement with change in velocity, direction of movement. All right, run to that cone and back, right? And you go at your own pace, you touch the cone, you come back. That's change of direction. Right, reactive agility is a rapid whole movement with change in velocity or direction in response to a stimulus. So now if I go all right, you're going to sprint down there, but when I clap, you're going to change direction, right? So that's basically a verbal stimulus. I mean, it's verbal, but you hear it, right? Now, I guarantee you, we get 2 people, and they do a test, run to the cone and back. One of them wins, right? Do you think that the same one will win if I clap? Depends, but the thing is that a lot of times you'd be very, very surprised that the person that actually may not be faster, right, but they have faster reaction times. So that's why it's not always the same, right? It's not, you can't always determine who's the better athlete just by looking at a program drill, okay? All right, so this is kind of like it's really geeky, all right? But maybe if you can't see it. So this says agility, right? This is from Exos Athletes Performance, who are pretty incredible at all the stuff that they do when it comes to speed training. Here it says perception and decision-making factors, right? So, and down here we got change of direction speed. So check this out. So when we're talking about reactive agility, look at all the factors that actually matter, right? Visual scanning, right? So it's understanding environment. So think about it, like athletes that it can actually scan, that have better eyesight, that's why you'll see the top, for instance, quarterbacks, right? They can read situations faster. They have great sight, and basically they can understand environment in a context way faster, right? They see what's happening faster than somebody else. So they basically throw to where somebody will be instead of where they are, right? Pattern recognition, that's the other thing. It's anticipation. Remember how you have like guys that have been playing the game for a long time? I used to play pro in Europe, right? And you'd have like these two guards that, you know, you were like, oh, this guy's out of shape. Like I can dunk and I can sprint faster than him. But their pattern recognition was nuts. Like they would know where you'd go. They'd know, like they would anticipate everything before it happened. So they used less energy to basically constantly, I would be so tired running after them, and they just like know where I'm going, and cut and stuff like that. And they would literally look, they could drink a beer during a break, just shoot threes, like drop 40 on you, right? So these are all huge factors, right, in perception and decision making. And then you have reaction time, right? So we got visual scanning, pattern recognition, and reaction time. These are all factors like in reactive agility. And most of the time, I mean, if I said this to you, you'd be like, oh man, we don't do any of that stuff, right? And then change in direction speed, we got linear speed, which we talked about, right? Just straight up speed. Then we got multi-speed and strength. So remember, we were talking about reactive strength, starting strength, and then leg symmetry, right? So remember, if one of the legs is way stronger than the other leg, what ends up happening, right? You can't run as fast as possible, right? Because you're lagging, you compensate, okay? Anthropometry, can't do much about that. That's just the way you're built, right? Where your joints attach, how long your limbs are, and then biomechanics technique. So these are all factors in reactive agility, right? It's not just, hey, I'm doing this program drill and I'm getting better. It's a lot of stuff. Now, some of it we can't influence because it's very genetic, right? But a lot of it we can, okay? So, right, so there are two, this means reaction time. RT is reaction time, right? So there are two reaction time phases. One is a latency phase. So this is the time between receiving stimulus and the appearance of EMG in certain muscles. So I don't, so you guys are not like, oh, what are you talking about, dude? Okay, so that means that like if by the time I see something, right, and basically between the time that I see that I receive the stimulus, sound or I see it, and the time that you actually see activation of the muscle. So an electric, that's EMG, electromyograph, right, in certain muscles. So when they do tests, like in labs, by the time somebody saw it and the time that basically the muscle actually started firing, there was some type of electrical response in it, right? And this is genetic. You can't do anything about it, right? Some people are born with basically having insane like reaction times where they can see something and react to it insanely fast, right? The response phase is from the time that this EMG appears and the motor action, so you actually do it, right? So that's trainable, right? So here's some cool stuff. This is back from 1989 at Harvard, right? So average reaction time for simple tasks, so auditory. So you hear it, so that's how you react fastest. Auditory is 0.142 seconds. Tactile, so maybe somebody touches you and react, 0.155. Visual, you see something, is 0.194, right? It's a short amount of time, right? But remember, so these are trainable things. Hicks' law just means that increase in stimulus response pairs, there's the linear increase in reaction time. So meaning that if I give you one stimulus, you're going to react faster. If I start giving you multiple stimuluses, it's going to take you longer to react. And that's trainable too. So if I give you 3 different cones, right, and I just go left, right, you can react faster if I go, the cones are different colors, and I go left, yellow, red. Make sense? Right? And then on top of that, if I add another stimulus, reaction time slows down even more. But then think about sports, right? How many different stimuluses there are, right? The coach is yelling a play. You see somebody moving, and then this guy yells something, right? There's a lot of stimulus. So the more that you improve that, the faster you can react to it, and it has really nothing to do with actual speed. Right? So now we're like, whoa, there's a whole other component that we can improve to improve our reaction and gain time, right? Which to me is like awesome, right? To me, that means, I can make you faster through strength, mobility, stuff like that, and I can make you react faster by being able to process the stimulus faster. Are we still, does everybody get that? Cool. All right, so decision making. Okay, like I said, I didn't want to go too much into this stuff, but, right, when you have the input, the reaction time is made of perception, decision, and an action. So stimulus identity, response selection, and response program. Then, right, so that's all processed into, basically in your brain, right? Then you got motor program, goes into the spinal cord, muscles, and then you have the output. Right? So it just means that, like, what we think about, like, the whole decision-making process is, there's a lot to it, right? And the cool thing about it is that a lot of stuff can be trained, right? That if you can process things faster, you can react faster, which means if you get think about this, half a step or one step in football or in basketball, I mean, that's it. That can win games. It's like it's the difference between I'm going to blow by someone or somebody's going to always catch up to me, right? And that's huge, right? Because we do play in such a small area. Like I said, if you're playing a team sport, you move in such a small area that one step is game winner, right? One step is another point. It's another play, right? So remember, most training happens here, like person task, right? Hey, you're going to run down and run back, okay? And that's basically change of direction, right? Let's improve your change of direction. 5-10-5, L drill, go. Break, do it again, right? But when we add environment, right, that's reactive agility. Okay? So where I set up the same cones, but now I'm clapping for you to change direction, right? Or I have a rabbit, or I have somebody that I'm guarding, right, and I got to stay with him, right? And then the coach claps, and when he does, I got to sprint. Now I'm adding an environment. This is reactive agility. This is what all team sports is about, right? So, reactive agility captures an athlete's ability to rapidly and accurately move in response to sport-relevant cues, whatever those are, right? Whatever sport you're playing. So, create sport and relevant context for reactive agility training hardens the perception, decision, and action relationship. So, we'll talk about increase in sport and age. Look, the truth is like when you practice the sport, you essentially are increasing this, right? But there's ways to do it in training, right? There's ways where you can just shorten the gap a lot with training. Right? And it's called chaos sports speed, and we'll get to it at the end. Right? So right now, most of the stuff is done like linear speed. Right? You go, you got your practice or whatever, you're doing 10-yard acceleration drills, you're doing 40 yards, right? Then you do change of direction stuff. So 5-10-5s, L drills, etc. Right? Sometimes, like I said, even just saying left, right, and stuff like that, that would still fall in the line of change of direction. But how many teams, how many of you are doing actual reactive agility testing, right? To where you see that you've improved a drill that has a human stimulus similar to your sport, right? So if I set up 4 cones and I'm sprinting, right? And once you hit something, I don't know, you see a lot of the pro teams now are using lights and stuff, right? But they're like $10,000 machines, and I'm like, yeah, you can do the same thing with tennis balls. They're like $5, so, right? But that's the point. The point is that you can set up tests that will improve, right, your reactive agility. And you can set them up to match like whatever sport you're in. So it can be colors, it can be cognitive, it can be verbal, it can be like all types of different stuff. And like I said, we'll go over this. I'm just explaining what it is and why it's so important so you understand like what needs to be added into your training so that you can improve your performance. All right, so we're getting to the cool stuff, right? This is like the simple kind of like, okay, what are the 5 best ways to build an agile athlete? Number 1, get stronger. Get stronger, right? Here's the thing, right? If you're an athlete, there is a certain level of strength after which it's diminishing returns. Meaning that if you play soccer, right, and right now you deadlift 200 pounds, if I get you to deadlift 500 pounds, man, we got a lot of force to work with, right? We can improve power, we can improve speed, we can improve agility. But then after 500 pounds, the law of diminishing returns, right? You're not a power lifter and so on and so forth. And here's the reason why, too, because most sports, you have to, I'll show you some numbers later, you have to apply force very, very, very fast, right? And remember, powerlifting, to get to maximal strength output takes anywhere from like 0.4 to 4 seconds, or like 0.8 to 4 seconds. So actually a long time. Because if you think about it, a sprint takes 0.012 to like 0.018, right? So meaning that once you get like really, really, really strong, at a certain point in time, like the extra strength doesn't really help you much, right? We train in our gym in Slovenia, we train Primož Kozmus. He's like the world's, essentially, he was silver medalist in the Olympics, but he's the world record holder and world champion and all that stuff in the shot put. Like, I'm sorry, the hammer throw. You guys know the hammer throw, right? When you spin and throw like a 20-pound hammer like 90 feet or some crazy stuff. So he trains at our gym, and he's very, very strong, right? But he's not the strongest out of all the hammer throwers. Like, there's guys that deadlift more than him, that squat more than him, right? But he can transfer that strength that he has so fast to throwing that hammer, right? That he throws it further than anybody else. Because if I can't take the strength that I have and basically apply it fast, then it goes nowhere. That's why, so perfect example, guys. Power lifters, right? You guys know, like, the world record in the deadlift, Andy Bolton is like 1,014 pounds, right? Why does Andy Bolton not have the highest vertical jump in the world? Right? He can apply the most force, right? But he can't apply it fast. Now, who are, on average, which of the athletes, all right, raise your hands, I don't know, like I'll buy you a smoothie if you get this one right. Out of all the athletes in the world, on average, who has the highest vertical jump? You can say it out loud, man. Like, I'm not going to laugh at you. No, I'm like specifically. So you'd say basketball, right? No. Olympic lifters. Yeah, Olympic lifters. Good job, buddy. Although, yeah, you work here, so you shouldn't get that. But here's the thing: is like, why, right? Because so even NFL, like the average actually vertical jump in the NBA is around 24 inches. I mean, I'm not saying it's crappy, but it's not like spectacular, right? The NFL, you're getting close to 28, 29. I'm talking about averages, right? The average Olympic weightlifting athlete, vertical jump, average is like 33 inches. I'm talking about like the 320-pound dudes are jumping like 32 inches and 33 inches. Think about that. Like, you ever seen, like, go watch some videos when people like snatch a lot of weight and then they drop and they go like, yeah, and like they're not even trying to jump high and the dude is just like here, right? Because they can apply force. So here's the thing. So the guy that can, if you guys have ever seen like Dmitry Klokov, right? You see him on YouTube a lot doing crazy stuff. So he's extremely strong, but he still doesn't lift nearly as much weight as the strongest power lifter. But he can take that weight above his head in such fast time that it's crazy. So it means he can apply force extremely fast. And thus he has a high vertical jump. Do you think those guys train the vertical jump? No, not much. Right? They can just apply force into the ground fast. So you have to have the right amount of full body strength to absorb and redirect forces, right? Decelerate, overcome inertia, and then reaccelerate in another direction, right? This type of three-dimensional movement cannot happen without the right amount of full body strength and intermuscular coordination, right? Remember, muscles work together. If I sprint full speed to like a cone, boom, 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 and I slow down, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm decelerating. This is isometric, and then I'm reaccelerating, right? All my muscles need to be able to coordinate to do those things. And all of my muscles need to be very, very strong to do that, right? You'll never see a weak athlete be really fast. You just won't. They might have great genetics and like have a great elasticity and stuff, but the top guys, like, you look at all the sprinters in the world, like, they're built like powerhouses, right? That's why, we joke around and you say, hey, what do you want to look like, a long distance runner or a sprinter? And the long distance runner, I mean, it's a joke, but like frail, and then the sprinter is like jacked, right? Because he's using a lot of muscle. And those guys do a lot of squats, they do deadlifts, they do cleans, they do a lot of these things, right? So getting stronger, if you come to me and you go like, Luca, I want to, and I hate stuff like that. Hey, in 6 weeks, I want to be faster. Man, I'm not doing much sprinting with you. I'm just doing mobility work, maybe plows depending, but I'm just doing a lot of strength. 6 weeks later, you're faster. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Right? Number 2, improving the ability to decelerate. Question I ask everybody is like, would you drive a really, really fast car with no brakes? Right? Imagine I went to the dealership and I was like, man, I just bought this new car. It's crazy. Listen, but there's no brakes in there. Fuck that. I got this. Right? There's no way. Right? Deceleration actually comes before acceleration. And you know what's one of the first things that we test people? Like is even a simple drop jump like this. Step on a box, especially with girls. Step off, what happens? Right? And you'll see a lot of, especially women, knees falling. There's not even strength to stabilize. Why would you add plyometrics to somebody's program when they can't stick and decelerate? That means that like you're trying to build more horsepower in a car that has no brakes, right? So focusing on the eccentric portion of the movement should not be overlooked. In actuality, right, it should be taught first, how to land, how to stop, right, technique, but then also in strength training, right? So basically, by enhancing athletes' eccentric strength, you're improving the athlete's ability to stop and accumulate, right? So reduce potential dissipation, so we're not losing the force and elasticity, elastic energies, and change direction more rapidly. It's the number one thing. If somebody doesn't know how to stop, even when you see people sprinting, right? Somebody sprints and you go, stop, and they stop like, right? They have no posterior strength. They don't stop here, right? I have deceleration. So if you can't decelerate, why am I going to teach you to accelerate, right? And here's probably, I put it in red because it's so important. If you watch sports, all team sports, right? And I'm not talking about injuries where somebody hits you, okay? I'm talking about non-contact injuries, which is like in football and soccer, non-contact injuries are more than 70% of injuries. So when people get injured, it's not when somebody smashes into you. Most of them are like nobody touches you, okay? Non-contact. Most injuries, like I mean most, a huge amount of injuries happen during deceleration and stopping. So in basketball, when do injuries happen? Somebody jumps and lands. Knee goes out, ankle goes, this goes, that goes, right? In football, blah, 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 they stop, boom. You don't really see a lot of people accelerating and getting injured. I mean, are there some? Yeah, sure. But if you looked at the statistics, majority fall into deceleration and stopping, right? They don't have enough posterior chain strength or eccentric strength. They don't have hip mobility. They don't have good form. They can't stop. So they're stopping with the wrong muscles, and those muscles get overworked, and then boom, right? So this is huge. This is huge, and it's like I don't understand programs where there's no testing, where you come in, and it's like, all right, guys, we're going to start this strength training program. All right, 2 days of plyometrics, right? Not everybody falls into that same category. For me, you're not doing any plows until you're not strong and stable, and you can't decelerate, land, and stop right? Period, okay? So number two is improving ability to decelerate. Number 3, improve ability to accelerate. 2 and 3 go hand in hand. Like some people will say this is number 2. I say, you know what, they're both really important. But so what you'll find is there's a correlation to the athlete's ability to accelerate and their ability to change direction, right? So usually the guys that you see that are very fast to accelerate, they're also very good at stop to change direction, right? So when you focus on acceleration, you're actually able to get double whammy. I call it double whammy, right? You're improving 2 things at once. So qualities to improve acceleration have such an emphasis in our training because all of the qualities it improves. It improves both, right? It improves both. Now, kicker. Okay, so we did 3 out of 5, okay? We did 3 out of the 5. And the reason I'm going into something what's called triphasic training is because getting stronger, building eccentric strength, and building concentric strength falls under triphasic training. This is actually a training model. It kind of like it's been around a long time since the Russians, but Cal Dietz is the person that really like put it together, and he's basically one of the unbelievably great strength coach at University of Minnesota, right? So basically think about it. There's 3 things: eccentric, right, negative movement, right, concentric, and then isometric. Does everybody know what that means? Otherwise, I'll explain it. Right? So eccentric movement, like if I was doing a squat, on my way down, this is eccentric. That's the negative portion of the movement. When I stop, that's the isometric, and this is the concentric, the positive movement. Make sense? Right? So what you'll see, right, many traditional training methods teach athletes how to expel energy. They're always, it's all about concentric. That's all they're teaching, always, right? So little time and effort is spent teaching them to absorb it. Think about that. If I look at the jump, right? If I jump, when I land, eccentric, isometric, before I do it again. So why would you teach one portion when there's 3? And the truth is, like, the eccentric and isometric load up the concentric. They're like almost more important, essentially. They're the base of it. So the entire focus of the triphasic method is learning how to eccentrically and isometrically absorb energy before applying it in explosive dynamic movements. Because if you can do that, then that's where you become a beast, right? Because I'll be honest, like for instance, I'm pretty fast, right? I'm pretty fast. I'm like not the fastest guy in the world, right? But I started strength training very, very early when I was playing basketball, right? Like when I was 14, I was already lifting weights. And what ended up happening is these guys that were like jump higher than me and were faster than me, north-south, then we started doing agility drills. And I could stop and like cut like a lot faster than them. And they didn't understand it, right? Because it's like, man, like, have you been doing agility training? Nope. I've just been lifting weights, right? And the thing is like at that point in time, luckily, like when I was 16, I trained under somebody called Srđan Đorđević. You probably won't be able to pronounce the name, but he used to train Marilyn Adi and Brigita Bukovic, who was the 92 silver medalist in 110-meter hurdle. So he's one of the very well-known track and field coaches. I was kind of like very, very fortunate that my basketball coach knew him, introduced me. I sneaked my way in. I worked some jobs to be able to do it because I didn't have any money. But I learned so much, and this is some of the stuff that I learned. Without knowing the theory, this is the stuff that we were doing, right? This is the stuff we were doing, and I didn't actually understand what was behind it. But I was basically learning to absorb force and doing eccentric stuff, and I was like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. Like this, he was just like, shut up. I shut up, and I kept doing it, right? But that's why. Because if I can if I can absorb force and redirect it, man, that means I can change direction faster than somebody else. Okay? So, check this out. All right? Once again, squiggly lines, awesome. So here, the red line is an undeveloped athlete. The blue line is a developed athlete. Okay? What this is called the V curve, right? So basically, to be a very great explosive athlete that can be agile, the better your V is, right, on this graph, the more of a monster you are. And what this is, see, this is deceleration, this is the isometric, and this is the concentric, right? See that? So the untrained athlete, it takes him longer to stop. So it takes him longer to decelerate. And then it takes him longer to redistribute force. And because that force is lost, guess what? His concentric, his reacceleration is weaker too. Where this guy stops fast, transfers energy fast, and goes fast. See what I mean? And here's the deal. Like, if this is football, right, this right here is the one step. Here's like, oh, I got you, right? And you're done every time. In basketball, it's the boom, or I'm going to switch, boom, and I'm gone. That's it right there. Bam. And you'll see if you pull up the top athletes in the world and you do this stuff with them, what you're going to see is like some freaky stuff, right? Freaky stuff. Hey, but here's the kicker, right? This will never have a lesser slope than this. Does that make sense? So you'll never be able to absorb less force on the negative portion of the movement than you will be able to in a concentric. Does that make sense? The only place you can do that is in the gym, where I go, hey, listen, barbell, we're going to do a 5-second eccentric. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1001, 1002, boom, right? That curve is going to be slow because we're training it. But if in sport, if you do any movement at maximal force, this curve will never have a lower slope than this one. Because in truth, you can always do more weight, like you're always stronger on the eccentric than you are on the concentric. Does that make sense? If I make you do your bench press, right, and you can bench press 300 pounds, I guarantee you can lower 350. You won't be able to get it back up. So eccentrically, I'm stronger, right? Which is, think about it, this is how you can also train like all these properties. That's why we do eccentric training. It's like triphasic training model, right? Most training programs do not take this into play. And not only are you kind of like hindering yourself, you're also kind of like exposing yourself to injury. So always remember that V, right? Because that's what makes you a beast, okay? So this is what I was talking about. Actually, a little off. Dynamic actions, right? Sprinting, 0.08 seconds to 0.12 seconds. That's how long that is. Boom. That's it. Jumping, 0.17 to 0.18. Shot put, 0.15 to 0.18. Powerlifting, 0.8 to 4 seconds. Right? So if I go and go like, all right, Hugh, today we're going to warm up and we're going to get to our heaviest weight that you can lift on a deadlift. Right? And he gets to 450 and it looks like this. Ah, boom, 3 seconds. Right? So this is what I was talking about. Okay, great. He can deadlift 450. But how fast can he apply it into these things? That's what I was talking about earlier. Powerlifter takes, right? Like he's grinding, takes 4 seconds for him to come up. So why can't he jump high? Well, shit, because it takes him 0.17 to 0.18. So how much force can he apply in that amount of time? Even if he can deadlift like 800, how much can he apply? Right? And a lot of them can't apply it fast because that's not what they've trained. So you need to get strong and you need to train how fast you apply that force. But you also need to apply how fast you can decelerate it, right? And then use it isometrically to then push forward. This is important because it makes you realize, hey, what am I training? Right? And here's another equation. There's two, when we test athletes, they're either what I call static proficient or dynamic proficient. So dynamic proficient athletes are, if you've ever been to that, like for me, it's always basketball, right? I go to the gym, there's a skin, like, man, I trained so long, there's this skinny kid, and he's just like, right? And I'm like doing 20 minutes of warm-ups. I'm like, oh, I got this, right? But that person is dynamic proficient, meaning that like he's got a lot, his genetics, he's got long tendons, he's got a lot of elasticity, right? He can jump, he can use that force and basically reapply it, right? So people that have long tendons, you'll see their calves are really high up, right? Stuff like that. They're very bouncy, right? Now, if you take that athlete and you do a lot of plyometrics with them, you're not doing anything. You're not helping them at all, right? They got elasticity for days. It's genetic. That's the person you want to make stable and strong, and you'll improve their performance. Now, you get static proficient athletes, which are not as elastic, and you know those guys too. Usually they go towards like slower sports and things like that. Now, those people you might want to train more rate of force development. When the time is right, you might want to add more plyometrics in. Right? So not everyone is built the same. That's the other thing that you got to understand, guys. Like everybody's different. Right? The cookie cutter stuff is not good. Even if I have a team of 40 athletes and I'm training a team of 40 athletes, I'm breaking it down. Right? Static proficient, dynamic proficient. Like these guys are doing 3 to 4 sets of some plyos before training. These guys are not. They're doing other stuff. Right? But you got to be on top of that stuff because otherwise you're just putting everybody into a box. All right, you probably won't see this. So it says, 4-week study on a group of baseball players at the University of Minnesota, right? Because that's where Cal Dietz is at, so he's testing stuff. The test was a 5-10-5 agility, I'm pretty sure. So 5-10-5 is you put 3 different cones, right? One cone, 5 yards apart is another cone, 5 yards apart is another cone. You start in the middle cone. A lot of you probably, if you've been in football training, you know, right? I sprint to one cone, I sprint to all the way out to the second cone, and then I run through the middle. That's my time, right? So that's the test. Now, a lot of these guys were horrible, right? Meaning, they were really high. Remember, if you want to be fast and agile, you got to be low to the ground. If I see somebody who's changing direction here, while I'm here, oh man, I'm crushing you, right? Lower center of gravity, my hips can load up, all types of stuff. You're getting destroyed, right? So, no one was doing very well. They came in, all looked sloppy, and so on and so forth. Right? He's like, okay, I'm going to do testing. Split them up into 2 groups, right? One is a standard method group, right? This is the off-season. So off-season program. They're doing medicine ball throws. They're doing explosive squats, concentric strength, right? All the regular stuff a lot of D1 programs do. Like just focus on the explosive part going up, right? They're doing proprioceptive work, no eccentrics, no isometrics, right? Like most traditional D1 programs. Also, 3 times a week, they ran the drill before they did their strength. So they actually did the drill, right? So the 5-10-5 drill that they tested, they actually did it 3 times a week. Coaches worked on their technique to make them more proficient at the drill, right? Second group, triphasic method, So basically, they just added the triphasic elements to their normal workouts. Specifically, drills to emphasize eccentric deceleration, right? So slower negative, isometric absorption, so eccentric squats, right? Think about that, like control down, single leg isometrics. So if I'm holding a Bulgarian split squat with some weights, just holding it, right? Posterior chain emphasis, so a lot of emphasis on butt, glutes, hamstrings, right? Backside, right? This group did not perform any agility drills, was not coached on technique, none of it. So all they did was strength training, nothing else. But they focused on the triphasic model, right? Pre-test times, standard method, triphasic method. Their average was 4.8 seconds, same, right? Post-test time, standard method, 4.7. Triphasic method, 4.4. So these guys did agility drills, did all the basic stuff that usually they do. They improved 0.1. You go like, no, it's fine. But these guys improved 300%. So think about that. If there's two different coaches and you bring your team and they're training the standard method, and I'm on a 5-10-5 drill, I'm beating you by 0.2 seconds. And this is a 4-week study, by the way. 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, we did that. Whose team is going to win? Right? Like, you're going to get smashed. I mean, it doesn't look like a lot, but you got to remember, this is 3 times that in 4 weeks. Right? Because having a smart strength training model that focuses on the things that most people don't focus on. Okay? That's how powerful it can be. Right? Duh. I just like that face. Because it was like, really? All right. So we're back to it. 5 best way to build an agile athlete. Increase sport and age. So this is the stuff that we don't do here. Like, athletes increase strength and ability to accelerate, decelerate will translate into better on-field agility once they become more comfortable with their sport. Right? So athletes sport and age, so that just means the time you play your sport. Not necessarily years, it's the amount of hours and I would say practice, but like deliberate practice, right? When I say deliberate practice, I mean really focused practice. Increases, you'll become more neurologically, meaning you have a higher threshold of motor unit recruitment, right? So think about it this way, like anytime you do something the first time, I remember like if you remember the first time you bench pressed, right? A barbell, the first time ever, right? I remember I did like 135 pounds, and like unrack it, and it's like, I mean, it was just like killing me, right? But then 2 weeks later, I'm like repping it for like 8 to 10. Did I get that much stronger in 2 weeks? Nope. No, I just had a higher rate of threshold motor unit recruitment. So my muscles were better at recruiting more fibers, and the pattern they basically remembered the pattern better, right? And also physiologically, intermuscular coordination, right? The muscles working together to do that movement. Now, it's the same in sport, right? You bring in someone right now that like has never played, soccer, especially they're older or something like that, and you kick the ball to them, and like, oh, it's like watching like, it's bad, right? And the more they do it, the more proficient they get. Now, obviously, when they're younger, your nervous system is more plastic and you can pick it up faster. Some people just genetically can pick it up faster if they have good movement patterns, okay? So basically, they get more efficient at sport-specific skills required for their sport and position. The more you do of it, the more you practice it with deliberate practice, the better you get at those things, right? So this means they're able to transition quicker between and utilize less energy for execution of each random sprinting play or skill requirement, right? So you ever, like, the top athletes, he makes it look so easy, right? Because he's done it so many times, and he's done it so many times perfectly. And I don't know, if you watch boxing, right, Floyd Mayweather and stuff, when you have incredible technique, the technique takes, so basically, you use less energy, right? So his technique is so good that his step, his follow-through, his hip, pop, pop, right? He uses less energy than the guy that's tight and uncoordinated, right? Uncoordinated people get tired faster. You ever want to, say like for fat loss, give somebody stuff to do that they've never done before, like basic stuff. Like you've never seen anybody do a Turkish get-up? You make them do a Turkish get-up, and like they do 2 reps. Oh my God, what a workout. Like you did 2 reps, good job. You got up from the floor. I mean, I'm like not joking, but the thing is, right? When your body has to do things it hasn't done before, right? Intermuscular coordination and new moves, like it's tiring. It's very, very tiring. So when you do it 10,000 times perfectly, yeah, you make it look easy. Remember, when we were talking about reactive agility, and we said like perception and like awareness of space and all these different things, how you read things, this falls into that. So increasing your sporting age improves your reactive agility, right? Basically how you process stuff and the decision-making process, okay? But you do, like there is a word, like I said, it's called deliberate practice. If I go to the basketball court and I'm just like, messing around with my friends, like, right? And I'm there for 3 hours and somebody goes like, oh, what are you doing? Oh man, I was practicing for 3 hours, right? And then somebody else comes in for 45 minutes and they're just like on it, perfect shot. Man, focus, they're there like this, right? That guy in 45 minutes has improved his skill level 10 times more than the person that was fucking around for 3 hours. Every single time. It's called deliberate practice, right? It's a huge, huge, huge difference. That's why you see a lot of kids, they go and play open gym, and they're like, man, I keep hooping, like I don't understand. And it's like because you're not focused. You're not focused on the things, doing them perfectly, okay? And number 5, and this is where we're going to kind of spend a little bit of time. Chaos, speed, agility training, right? So chaotic drills, think about this. Chaotic drills are to develop reactive agility in many ways, right? Chaotic drills offer coaches opportunity to go beyond the limitations of preset, like cone drills, right? They provide athletes opportunity to improve their ability to maintain balance, control of their mass, create force in non-optimal positions, right? This is all the stuff that, like I said, we were talking about earlier where it's like it's reactionary to different things. Now, here's the cool thing, right? Integration of cognitive chaotic drills. Cognitive means that you got to think about it, right? I used to train with when I moved up here, with a guy named Jason Baskett who runs Emerald City Basketball Academy. And used to train like Jason Terry and like Josh Childress and a lot of NBA guys. And we did that stuff. And like I never did that stuff on that level that I did with him. And I'll explain kind of cool stuff that we did that's going to fall into this, right? But those cognitive chaotic drills have far basically reaching benefits beyond just athletic development, right? It can potentially improve hand-eye coordination, depth perception, mental acuity, like how fast you think on the fly when different things happen, right? In game time situations. So there's 4 categories. I know Joe DeFranco and Smitty put 3, but like we do 4. Basically, audible, so coach provides verbal directional cues, right? Go left, go right, clapping and stuff like that, right? That's audible, right? Visual, coach provides visual direction cues or the athlete engages in simple mirroring or tag drills. So, for instance, you sprint towards me, I go like this, right? You might spin and go that way. You might cut and go that way, right? That's visual, like you're looking at stuff, right? Mirror drills, 2 cones. I'm watching you. You move the same thing you do, I do, right? It's reactive. It's chaos. It's visual. Kinesthetic is based on touch. Teammate can tap to change direction. So we've done that stuff where, like, you're just waiting here, right? And you're waiting for the touch to react, right? Touch, boom, go. Okay, so that would be kinesthetic. Cognitive, now this can get really, 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 really crazy, but this is what I was talking about. Coach can provide a verbal task that requires interpretation. So think math solving. All right, so, and the thing is, this is where, reaction time starts slowing down, but you can train this, and it's incredible. This is what I was doing with Jason, right? This can also be visual, by the way, but think about it this way. So I'm going to give you, as you're doing a drill, I'm going to give you a math equation, 2 + 2, right? Now, if it's odd or equal, you're going to do different stuff. So 2 + 2 is 4, so you might be sprinting down, I say 2 + 2, and like that's 4, and they basically as an even number, you might cut to the right, right? I'll say 3 × 3 is 9. That's odd. You might spin and backpedal, right? Now think about that. How fast would you react if I just said it or clapped or something, or when I do that? That's called cognitive drills. Now if I'm a point guard and I'm running down at speed full court, right, and I'm seeing all these different things and I got to react, like cognitive training improves that, improves decision making on the run. So things that I would do, give you examples with Jason Baskett, like there'll be cones with different colors on them, right? I'd be running down at speed full court. And before he'd say, hey, purple cone means between the legs, crossover, pull up. Yellow cones means spin, floater, right? So you're going full speed. Yellow, boom. At the beginning, it'd be like, Okay, go back, right? But then I started getting better at it, and like he'd give me like things like basically math stuff to solve while I was really, really tired and things like that, right? And obviously there's, this is far-reaching. I could probably do a whole seminar on that, but the point is in game type situations, you can do crazy stuff. You can do crazy stuff. You know all the plays. Like for instance, I always played a shooting guard, but when I went pro, I played a point guard. Like when I was in Ukraine, I needed to know 27 plays, and every play has multiple things that go out of it. So now think when you're like 2 down, right? And it means this guy's coming off of 2 screens, and then he goes back off of 2 screens, comes out that way. This post drops down. If this post doesn't get the ball, this post goes here. I drop it to him. You know what I mean? There's a million things going on. So think how this like cognitive stuff can improve those things, right? The truth is you're never trying to replace true sport actions. That's what you do in training, right? As a strength coach, I'm not trying to be your skill coach. I'm not trying to be your coach in the sport that you're playing. But you can incorporate cognitive training, and what it does basically, imagine that it just becomes like a tunnel where you can speed everything up, right? So chaos speed agility training. This is actually from Robert Dos Remedios, who has an awesome DVD on chaos sports speed. But this is basically, think of it as progressive, right? This is what it stands for: conscious to subconscious, right? Have unpredictability, so it's got to be unpredictable. Active to reactive, open drills, and then slow to fast, right? Because the thing is, if somebody comes into the gym and we have them do a karaoke drill, right? Remember, karaoke's is this. And they have a very tough time doing a karaoke drill. We're going to make them get good at doing a karaoke drill, right? And then we're going to make them do karaoke drills with change of direction, right? Without any stimulus. And then we're going to start, clap, 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 right? The thing is, if you can't do it consciously, how are you going to do it subconsciously? So movement patterns, think about it this way. All this cool stuff, right? You don't just go there, right? You get to there. And a lot of people are not proficient to be doing that stuff, right? So same thing. If I can't get into this lateral lunge position, right, it means I got to get your mobility and strength and core strong enough to be able to do that, right? To then train it in a chaotic environment. Otherwise, you get hurt. Otherwise, you get compensations. Okay, so this is important to understand that although these things, there's a lot to it, you always, just like you would anything else, you build up to it, right? There's a progression. So here's just some cool stuff, and I'll go back to this. Like I said, if you guys want to stay around a little bit, I'll show you a couple of these, right? Probably can't show all of them. Progression 1 is strength, so we covered that, right? There's a whole concept. You got to be strong, and you got to be strong eccentrically, isometrically, and concentrically. And not only do we have to be strong, we have to apply and show, we have to apply that force fast, okay? Progression 2 is closed drills. So you work on movement patterns in familiar environment first. Standard cone drills. Run to the cone and back, lateral slide to the cone and back. Like karaoke drills and things like that. Basic stuff in an environment that's familiar. So simple, right? If you can do that stuff, okay, then we move forward. And remember, the cool thing about it is that what we do, once you get good at one drill, we don't stop doing it. We just use it in warm-ups. So like agility ladders. I don't think that they suck. We just don't use them. Like spending time on agility ladders, a programmed agility ladder, right? I'm putting it in warm-up, right? That's where I'm putting it. So you can use all this stuff in warm-ups. Basic reaction training, tennis ball drills, first step quickness, cover ground. So for instance, right, you're in a 2-point stance, you're looking at me, I drop a tennis ball, right, 1 bounce, you got to catch it. Basic reaction drills. First step quickness, same thing. Right, I'm here, you clap, boom, I go, right? Stuff like that, covering ground. Progression 4, verbal, visual, physical, simple patterns. So sprint, 45-degree cuts, reverse pivot. Perfect example, Gene is standing there. All right, Adrian. Gene is standing there, right? I'm going full sprint towards Gene, and like 2 yards before I hit him, he goes like this. I spin, and I sprint. And the thing is, I try to stay in line, right? So think about how that would like convert maybe to a football play, right? Like I'm sprinting full speed, boom, I cut, but then I'm not trying to go out of bounds, I'm going down the line, right? So that would be like, for instance, a progression 4, and that would be a visual one. Like verbal, I could just say left, right? I could throw stuff. There's a lot of different things that we can do. Sprint, back pedal. So I sprint, you clap, I stop, right? We're training deceleration. You clap again, I sprint, I stop, right? Or for instance, sprint, one clap, or I can say it, backpedal, now I backpedal. See what I'm saying? So I'm reacting to everything. And this is, like I said, this is more of a simple pattern, okay? Progressions, verbal, physical, advanced patterns, multi-level, multi-cue drills, chaos in the box, verbal and visual. So think of it this way. If I start adding multiple things and I go sprint, karaoke, and out of the sprint, I got to go to karaoke. Stop, right? Lateral shuffle, sprint, right? So, and every time you sprint, it can be a change of direction. It can be going the same way. There's a million things that we can add, but now we're getting advanced. Chaos in the box could be verbal and visual. I stand in the middle of the box, cone, 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 right? I could just be pointing, boom, boom. I got to go there, always back to the middle, saying it, okay? Progression 6, visual, physical, rapid drills. Mirror, linear. Rapid drills can be, I'm facing you, right? I'm reacting to you, whatever you're doing. Rapid drills can also be, this is some stuff that I can show you guys. If I'm the rabbit and I'm in the middle, it's 2 people to the side. They mirror what I'm doing. So I sprint, I stop, they stop. I backpedal. I sprint again. I drop down to the ground. I bear crawl. I mean, like I said, you can add a lot of patterns here depending on what your sport provides. Maybe I'm sprinting and then I go to karaoke, and then I go to shuffle, and then sprint again, right? Now the rabbits have to stick with me. They have to do the same things as fast as I can, right? You can do chaos in the box. Same. So imagine putting 2 boxes, right? Like I'm in one box, Theo's in another box. Theo's mirroring me. So he's looking at me. I'm going to that corner. He's got to go to that corner. I come back, right? So it's like if you were taking a bird's eye view, it's like a mirror. He's trying to stick with me in a box, right? That's basketball. That's volleyball, for instance. Right now you got crazy stuff. Now you think about cognitive, chaos in the box opposite. So if I go this way, Theo's got to go that way, right? If I go that way, he's got to go this way. See what I'm saying? The brain has to work. But that's cognitive. And when you should get really good at that, the things that you can do in games is crazy, right? But look, that's progression number 6, right? So what does all that do? Chaos training. Improves sport speed, improves body awareness, improves body control, improves injury prevention, right? When you get this stuff down, you're not going to have torn ACLs. You're not going to have all that stuff, right? Because you're going to be able to be strong and stable and be able to support that stuff, okay? To me, that's almost like number 1. You know what? To be able to constantly progress through the season, don't get injured. Because if you get injured, that's it. You're out for a month, 2 months, 3 months. Then you come back and you got to retrain again, and psychologically you're spent because you're like, oh, I'm wary of my knee, I'm wary of my ankle, I can't do this, I can't do that. Compensations happen, all types of stuff. Right? So this is a pretty simple, like, obviously, there's a million things that we can put in here, right? And each one of those could be a separate seminar. All right, I'm finishing with this because basically, I might do a separate seminar on, speed versus speed conditioning, which is a different world because unfortunately, too many coaches say we're doing speed training. They're doing speed conditioning. They're not doing speed and agility training. All right, it's completely different. So role of core strength. What is core? We'd have to do a 3D to what everything core is. We think core is this, right? Rectus abdominis. But then there's external obliques, internal obliques, there's hip flexors, there's glutes, there's thoracolumbar fascia, there's spinal erectors, there's quadratus lumborum. There's a lot of different things that connect everything that are, I just call it the trunk, right? But people, when they say core, you just see people doing crunches. But the truth is a lot of what our core does is prevents us from moving, right? We move from the hips, we move from the arms, right? We try to keep this as connected as possible. If this is not strong and you move from your low back, you get injured, your knees get blown out, right? So the role of core strength is humongous, and like this in itself, like I said, yeah, I could go in forever and ever and ever, all right? But the point is like, if this is not strong, we cannot transfer force, right? So what does the core do? And like I said, this can go on forever. But in essence, when we talk about sprinting, when we talk about agility, right, it transfers ground reaction forces up through the kinetic chain, across the hips and torso into the upper extremities, right? So the thing is like, who are the best punchers in the world, right? You think it's the guys that have the biggest upper body and like really muscular, or is the guys that can create force, right? Bruce Lee, right? That dude could create so much force in the ground and transfer it to his punch. And it was crazy, right? We transfer all the way through. If there's a leak, then we lose the force, right? Or if I'm super tense. Remember, right? If I'm not like relaxed, I can't transfer force. And if you saw a lot of studies for Stuart McGill, like he was doing tests on the top. I mean, you guys already all heard like a GSP, right? George St. Pierre, like he's retired now. But like his kicks were like, 2,600 pounds, 2,400 pounds, like continuously. And they do what's called like a double pulse, right? So right before he kicks, he braces, right? And then he relaxes when the legs fly. And then right before he kicks again, right? Or Serena Williams, all these people that you hear like, ha, right? The reason they make these sounds is because they brace, they relax, and right before they hit, ha, they brace again, right? Because when you're relaxed, you go fast, and then I brace, boom, and there's more power, right? But the thing is like if I don't have core, right, to connect everything, I can't be explosive. I can't transfer that force one way or another, right? It's critical for absorption of potential during the deceleration, change of direction, and sport-specific sequences. So imagine, like I'm stopping here, right? Boom. Like if obviously I'm not going fast, so I can't hit these angles. But if my core is not solid, like this is jello. Like I can't push off as fast. You know what's a great example? Think of it this way. For a vertical jump, right? People are like, I want to improve my vertical jump. I want to improve my vertical jump. Work on leg strength and stuff, but I'm always like, man, we got to improve that core strength. Well, why, right? I'm like, all right, here's the pencil. All right, I'm going to put this pencil on the jello. Now push the jello up. The jello doesn't move much because the pencil goes through the jello. Now I put the pencil under the rock and I push it. Right? The thing, the core. Is it jello or is it the rock? Right? It's going to go higher if it's rock because now I can transfer the force. If I can't transfer the force, it goes nowhere. Right? Dependent of integrity and core mobility of the hips and upper back, forces are either accumulated, right, and transferred, or dissipated and inefficiently displayed. This is what I've been talking about the whole time. Am I transferring force, or is this just getting dissipated, right? Or it gets inefficiently displayed, meaning it goes somewhere where it's not helping you out at all, right? So this is the great connector of everything that we have, right? So think about it. For linear sprinting tension and force, it's transversely coordinated from hip to opposite shoulder. So think about it this way, right? When I sprint, boom, right? Essentially, opposite hip to this shoulder. This is so when this foot strikes, right? This is how the energy goes. Okay? Now, if this is weak, right, there's no connection. Right? So I gotta have that, right? So, for example, when we run, if the right arm is an extension, right? Boop, the left leg will also be an extension. Right? Obviously, I can't show right now, right? But on the other side, left arm will be in flexion, the right leg will be in flexion. So pendulum movements, right? Pendulum is like basically like one arm, one leg, right? Like sprinting, force transfer happens through thoracolumbar fascia. So if you guys ever heard of the Serapi effect, right? This is the thoracolumbar fascia, right? I go from here across. That's why also you see in the combine, the guys that are the fastest also have the best chin-ups. They can do the most reps of chin-ups, and they can do the most weighted chin-ups, right? Because their upper back, their posterior strength, like their relative strength of the upper body is really good. It correlates to sprinting very well, right? Serapi effect, opposite hip, opposite shoulder, okay? So this is the co-coordination that allows for the torso to remain fixed during top-end sprinting. Remember, when you sprint, right, this is like fixed, but this is pumping, right? If this moves, I'm not transferring force well, I'm not fast. So this keeps everything stable when all my other limbs are moving, right? So the athlete will achieve the highest potential for speed if they have appropriate level of core strength. Now that's assuming, right, that they're not restricted due to the mobility in the ankles, hip, and thoracic spine, right? So that then comes down to mobility again. So there are multiple factors that need to be in play. But in a good strength training program that has speed in there and agility in there, depending on what your sport is, all these things get covered, right? All this stuff gets covered and it improves simultaneously, right? Questions? So, like I said, look, guys, I mean, this is, every subject can go more in depth. And it's not, the point is never to confuse. Like, that's why I try to break some things down and be like, hey, if you break it all down at the end of the day, right, if you improve mobility, stability, relative strength, you'll be better already. Then there's a bunch of other factors, right?